Welcome to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's DIF, the online event series that brings you inspiring new ideas, projects, programs, and all things circular to inspire action and to get you thinking differently. We do apologise for the delay in the start of this session. We had a small technical hitch, but we do hope that you're going to enjoy us for what I think will be a really exciting session. My name is Rhaenyra. I'm the Higher Education Lead here at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And today we're going to be talking all things forest gardening. We're going to find out what forest gardening is all about. We're going to talk to the project manager. And more importantly, we're going to find out how we get this in a box. Don't forget, this is an interactive session and we will be collecting your questions and comments, which we will put to our guests today. And if you're watching when it's not live, please do continue to keep putting your questions and comments on and we will respond to those. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to welcome our guest, Rosie Frost, who is the project manager, she's project managing the Forest Garden in a Box project. Hi, Rosie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No worries. Just to start off, what exactly is a forest garden in a box?
Okay, well, a forest garden to start with is a very low maintenance, completely self-sustaining edible ecosystem which yields year after year, and it's actually modelled on the ancient knowledge of a forest in that it copies exactly the same principles and structure of layers of a forest. So you can grow together fruit trees, bushes, shrubs, herbs, vegetables and flowers that will all function together in a very mutually beneficial way, which makes it an incredibly stable and sustainable food system. And the yields themselves are always directly useful to humans, so whether that's food or craft or medicine. But the brilliant thing about them is that you don't dig, you don't add anything, you don't weed, and it just keeps giving back to itself. So you don't lose things like valuable soil nutrients and things like that. So its main benefit really is that it's kind of a future way of rethinking our food systems or sustainable eating. So it's seasonal, local, free. That's brilliant. It reduces food miles and food waste, and as I said, very little effort to get one going, and gives you quite a lot of energy back. So yeah, it takes sun and water, and that's it really. So it's what's not to love.
Sounds amazing. You mentioned something. You talked about a system. Can you please talk a little bit more about that for those that are listening who may not be as au fait with system thinking and why the system is so important?
Yeah. So I'll do it really top line. It's a great question. So what I mean by self-sustaining is that it's a system like with a forest. You'd let a forest go. It's largely untouched. So you're not disturbing the soil. When the leaves fall, they act as sort of a natural compost, and it sort of allows for these symbiotic relationships that are going on that we're not always aware of between microorganisms and the fungal network and so on. So if you're not digging in, tilling that soil and exposing those those microorganisms to the sun, it means that they enrich the soil, so you have an amazing soil. And also you can have plants in there that attract things like ducks or frogs that might eat the slugs of the natural pests. So you can be really clever with how the whole system functions and sort of self-maintains itself. So that's it, top line.
Amazing. And how on earth do I get all of this in a box? It sounds absolutely fantastic, but what is the idea behind a box and how am I going to fit all that life, all those plants, all into a box?
Yeah, good question. So I'll just rewind a bit and tell you about how we got to this box idea. So the National Forest Gardening Scheme sort of established itself in 2016, and it's a community interest company, but its main mission really is to get more and more of these forest gardens out in the community into people's back gardens as possible, but to really encourage this new mindset that we can consume a lot of food locally and seasonally if we sort of start foraging as a way of eating again. But really to reconnect people with the food that they're eating. I think as a society we buy stuff in supermarkets, we're so disconnected from the soil and the energy, and the system and the process it takes. So I think if we can get this sort of mainstream again and normalize this way of eating, that would be brilliant. But I also think if people are reconnected with the food they're eating, how they're eating, I think they start respecting nature a bit more, and I think start protecting it, and that's definitely something that we all need to be doing. But the forest gardens, they're so brilliant. They can build community, because imagine a world where if every park or green space had this forest garden in it, and you could go along, socialize there, pick your own and take it home with you. Pick your own food or your own fruit, instead of buying it in the supermarket, or as well as we'll pick some fruit for the lady next door. I just think there's a really lovely community element to this. And the other thing that we want to do is just educate and inspire people, and be in awe of sort of nature and abundance. But the box itself is a vehicle to make it more accessible to everybody. So people even with limited knowledge of how they got, how to go about gardening or planting vegetables. So it's something you can order online and you get it direct to your door. And it's basically a carefully curated set of forest garden plants. So trees, shrubs, herbs, flowers, and vegetables. And you can just get going. It's got instructions in it, really simple. We're hoping to establish it actually as almost a buy one, as an individual gift one model, which is how we're going to incorporate the community element. And I think there's so many spaces, underused council spaces that could be turned into these food sanctuaries. And I think the government just announced some funding recently about pocket parks, which is to ask people to come forward with ideas for how to transform like unloved or neglected derelict spaces into green spaces. So yeah, as I said, the box is like a vehicle to making this mainstream.
I mean, that all sounds absolutely amazing. Can we just backtrack a little bit?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there are people like me who never actually heard of the National Forest Gardening Scheme before I did my prep to kind of interview you. So I think it might be really useful just to backtrack a little bit and talk about the National Forest Garden Scheme and what that's about.
Yeah, so this is essentially a group of people with various different backgrounds, quite varied, and a guy called Paul Pivacic. So I was getting his name wrong. Sorry, Paul Pivacic. He himself is an organisation consultant and social entrepreneur, but he does a load of purposeful work with organisations and NGOs. And he just had done a forest gardening course himself, was massively inspired by it, and thought, hang on a minute, how can we get this out there, more of these out there in the world? And so he invited a whole load of people together, which was a mix, which is I think what's brilliant about this, a mix of people that were sustainability professionals and academics and youth workers and forest school teachers, community groups, and then forest gardeners. And from that, because he hosts lots of round tables, and from that they sort of thought, well, let's form an organisation. And then the box was born out of that first meeting. So luckily we've got lots and lots of people willing to collaborate and sort of on board with why this is such a great idea. But I think, sorry, just to mention that they can also have other functional purposes. So, if we get them out into communities that are in need of things like windbreaks or flood prevention or diversifying current nature patches, that's something these boxes can do.
I mean, I absolutely love this idea, and as an avid gardener myself, I really connect with it. But how did you get involved? Where did this come from? What does it mean for you?
Yeah, so for me, it was a perfect combination of sort of combining my work skill set with my love of growing my own food as an amateur, but very enthusiastically, and doing something with purpose now, I think. So I have a background, I'm a project manager, I have a background in innovation, and I have my own, I'm sort of director of a company called the Innovation Collective. So we are a group of consultants, creatives and project managers. But for me, I saw Paul describe these forest gardens and the box idea he'd had, and I just thought, well, this could work to my skill set. I can help with this. How can we get this, out there? And then, yes, as I said, experiment with my experimenting in veg. But I also, for me at the moment, I think I really needed to act on the climate and ecological crisis we're in. I need to do something tangible. This is a way of benefiting, somehow combating the trouble that we find ourselves in. And I think, just getting out in nature itself is massively brilliant for eco-anxiety, for stress. So for me, gardening is therapy. And for me, having now understood what forest gardens are a bit more, it's completely changed the way I look at nature, the way I respect it. I mean, even the other day I was just walking my boy to school, and I noticed a walnut tree, which I'd have completely, passed me by before. And they're actually incredible things. And one, I didn't even know that they could be grown in the UK. And two, I didn't even consider how walnuts fall to the ground. But how amazing is that? You get some free walnuts, take them home. What's not to love? So I've had a lot of fun with it. But now also I reimagine green spaces. Every time I pass a park, I think, gosh, that's got so much potential. Think what we could be doing with that. Because forest gardens aren't to stop people socialising and playing with them. They're just to help, let's, get people get involved with being able to have these amazing food sanctuaries with them.
I couldn't agree with you more, Anna. I mean, I love how you've gotten involved with this. I can also see behind you some forest garden boxes, which I'd love to know, how far along is this project? Because I know you had a crowdfunder and you hit your targets. So talk to me about how far along the project is, and have you tested them? I mean, you and I are both gardeners, and we could probably work our way around various different fruit trees or vegetable plants and various other things. But what about people who've never gardened before and who might feel slightly intimidated by thinking, oh, I'm going to buy this box. What if I kill literally everything in it? So maybe talk to us a little bit about, how far along the box project is and what kind of securities you can give to people who might feel a little bit intimidated by taking one of these on.
Yeah, okay. So we actually have a soft launch in February next year at a local, so Kath Gavin, who's the sustainability coordinator at the Hume Garden Centre, Community Garden Centre in Manchester. She's doing the first sort of commercial sell of these boxes. So you can go in there now if you want to and get vouchers to pre-order for February. So that's obviously a great Christmas gift, doing a quick plug there, planet-friendly Christmas gift. But so that's just for Manchester. What we're doing at the moment is finalising the list of nurseries that will help partner with us, because I think if you order this box, it's really important, if we can make this happen, that a local nursery supplies you, because they are very aware of the slight variance to different areas such as soil and climate and things that might affect what we kind of need to tweak to put in the box to make it successful. But yes, to your point about if you're a beginner, the idea is that these are for experienced gardens and also for novice. So you get in your box a prep guide. So what do you need to do to the soil in advance? Planting guide, maintenance instructions, and there'll be photos and visuals. Harvesting guide. We're either going to put in some educational fact sheets about certain plants that you may not have known, and hopefully recipe cards. So if you get this and go, hang on, I've got this plant called mallow, what do I do with this? How do I cook it? There's even a guide to help you with harvesting, because it's all very well if you have these wonderful edible flowers and so on, but what do you do with them? So the other thing is, in terms of success rate, because that is really important, we want so many of these out there, that the guild we've chosen has a proven success rate. They are durable plants. They are likely to fit at least 80% of growing spaces. But what we do when you go to order is we have a couple of questions we ask you, just to sort of sense check that your soil is your soil alkaline or acid. Is it a shady spot or a sunny spot? And for beginners, we've got a very visual guide on how they can look those things up themselves. So there are point of sale questions we're going to be asking you. But largely, yeah, they're pretty durable.
Well, that sounds really good. I suppose from my point of view, you've got it in Manchester, which is up kind of north of the country, where we are down south in the country. There'll be huge variances between the different soil types and how much sun there is, and it's really interesting that you are totally taking that into account in how people order. Have you done any trials of these yet? And if you have, what is coming out of them?
Yeah, so we know the guild that has been chosen will function really well, but what we're doing at the moment in parallel is we're trying to secure 20 trial sites, which is running independently to the box launch. But obviously people who buy a box can very happily feedback if they would like to. So there are going to be things beyond our control, like, animals bringing in seeds. Some plants might take over more than others. So in order, the point of the separate trials to test sort of 20 sites is just to get a bit more rigor, and just find out more about how these things establish, especially if you're giving them to individuals. Some will have more experience than others that are planting them. So it's a really lovely example of citizen science, and a guy called Thomas Remiaz is a forest garden specialist who's running that with input from the core forest gardening scheme. And we've also got like an academic supervisor to check it's rigorous. So we'll test the guild that we're selling in February, and also a retrofit version, so you can essentially buy most of it without the fruit or nut tree that will fit around an existing one. So what we're trying to do with those trial sites is not just test them in different areas to get a sense of what nature does and you know, differences in soil and so on, but things like get them out socially. So we are doing some work with Friends of the Earth. They're helping us at the moment. Their experiments team have identified 6 front gardens of a low income area where we could trial one of these sites. So we want to make sure that we could get these out into communities that would really benefit from them. Communities where there's often a fresh fruit or vegetable kind of access. So that's actually quite hard. So some of the sites have been donated essentially from universities or NGOs or local authorities. But yes, as I said, you know, if we could get them out benefiting people that are most in need of them, that would be great. So I think, you know, one of the other ambitions is what if we could, and that they've actually published a report or a sort of suggestion for new housing. Okay. So what if every new housing had to have a forest garden as well? And there was a way of sort of incorporating that into the build.
Oh, amazing. I mean, you've mentioned fruit trees as one of the things that's in the box, but what else comes in your box? I mean, what are you likely to get? We haven't actually asked, we haven't touched on that, but so, for those who are watching, we're really interested to know, what do you actually get in your box?
Yeah, so the plots are best for 8 to 10 meter squared areas, and you get a fruit or nut tree, you get various shrubs like currant and gooseberry bushes, shrubs like lavender, vegetables like chard and fennel, and I'll put you on the spot now, let me get my list. Do you know what we're going to do? What we'd love to do at the end is actually just post somewhere all of the contents. So things like, you know, ground covers, strawberry runners, fennels, mallow, comfrey, lemon balm. But as I said, at the end, I'll post somewhere if I can, so that people can. And actually what we'd love to do is open it up so anyone who is experienced or feels like giving this a go and you aren't able to get yourself in a box soon, you know, give it a go. If you've got the list, we'll, you know, just let us know how you get on.
Absolutely. Just as a reminder to everybody who is online and joining in, please do put your questions and comments in the chat box and we will pick them up and I will be able to ask Rosie. I mean, one of the things that sprung to mind in listening to all of this is, I guess, how is it different from regular gardening? I mean, I grow my own veggies, I do some fruit. How does forest gardening add on, or how is it different to just regular gardening?
Well, it's once low maintenance in that once you've planted it, you largely let it go. You leave it. You don't. So with growing your own veggies, you often harvest, turn the soil, replant, and your soil is constantly moving. With this, it acts like a forest in that you just let it go. You let it do its own thing, and it's perennial, so it'll come back year after year. So that's how it's different. And we are looking. So this is an interesting question. We're looking at, you know, could you add other vegetables to it, but they need to be ones that will not sort of disrupt the soil, because we re-express what a forest garden sort of ecosystem looks like if we're going to add other vegetables to it. But that's largely how it differs, because you let it go.
Which is, I have to say, at this time of year when I'm packing up my vegetable garden, a real draw card compared to what I have facing me over the next couple of weekends. So you've touched a little bit on benefits of forest gardening and forest gardening in a box as a project, but just let's recap a little bit. What do you see the main benefits being? And if we had to say, what does success look like? How would you define success?
Okay, so benefits are it will massively reduce food miles and food waste. If we can, let's think we can get these out everywhere. I suppose this is the ambition. So let's look at the carbon footprint on food supply. It's crazy. The energy equation so in terms of investing energy into these, they require manpower to get going, but the energy out yields year after year. So that's a bit of a no-brainer. And I think the UK is importing something like 60% of food, and a third of it's lost in supply chain. So if we can reduce some food miles, then that's brilliant. I think it can bring fresh fruit and vegetable and new, like diverse kind of fruit and veg to people in low income areas. But I also think they can be really social spaces, and they can build community. Just the act of getting a group of people together to go and plant one of these is really lovely. And I think that in itself will boost well-being. And if you're surrounded by nature, you know, there's loads of studies now saying that your mental and physical benefits rocket. You know, they're great for stress relief, they're great for immune systems. So they get people outdoors, getting vitamin D. And I think they're also really tangible. So, you know, anyone with help can go and plant a tree or go and plant something that's directly beneficial to the planet. And so I think there's something nice and like tangible about them if you're sort of stressed about where we're at the moment in terms of the ecological and climate kind of crisis. And then green spaces actually can boost economy. So the more green spaces we have in neighbourhoods, the better for everyone. And I just think there's plenty of space. There's plenty of redundant space that these places can pop up in. So that's benefits, but success, yeah. Success would be that these do pop up everywhere. I think something like foraging starts to trend, that becomes really trendy. I mean, it's really fun, I love it. And I think that we just generally see the UK rewild a bit more. And I think if we can give a leg up to establishing practices like this, like a leg up to things like agroforestry and regenerative farming, you know, that would be brilliant. And I think that farms and animals, you know, agricultural land don't have to be separate things. There's actually systems you can put in place to bring all of that back. I also think, like, one last thing is that we rely very heavily in the UK, sadly, on food banks. So I think there's something like 2,000 food banks in the UK, and 1.2 million people last year got given food parcels. If these forests could supplement that would be a real win.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think it would be amazing to be able to walk down the street and, you know, for people who need to be able to pluck an apple here, have some plums, find some mallow, work out what on earth to do with it. But I think I agree with you. I think there's a real success story there in how it would help deal with some of the issues that we have around the food crisis. So I'm going to get really practical now, because I think this is a really great project. How do I buy one?
Great. Well, at the moment, as I said, we're just finalising sort of the nurseries that we're working with, but you can in person get one in Manchester. So you can go into Hume Community Garden Centre, and there'll be vouchers on sale there. But then launching soon will be our online way of buying them. And as I said, you can choose. So the plan is that we've got this commercial one that you could choose for a back garden or a space near you, community element, but there's also going to be boxes for schools. The idea with those is that the fruit trees or nut trees in those will yield during school time, not term time, in the summer holidays. And those will also act as educational pieces. So there'll be handouts, kind of school guide, like classroom guides. And you use that as an outdoor classroom. It's so brilliant. And it essentially gets kids reconnecting with plants going in the soil versus a supermarket shelf. And I think that's going to be the future at the moment. So also window balconies. So we've got a large plot that we've got a set for, but essentially it's the same principle, say types of plants for different areas. You could just order one for a window balcony. And then, as I say, when you order online, there's a little checklist so that we know specific requirements, or whether you want one for a community space because it's going to act as a windbreak or something else. And you receive in the box, all the planting guides you need, prep, maintenance, and educational fact sheets.
I'm just going to pick up on something, two questions there really. So you've talked about a sort of large plot and a balcony space. What is the ideal minimum space requirement for one of these?
I personally don't want to comment because I'm not a forest garden specialist, but if you can get it in a window balcony, you can still have your own little system that just, you plant it once, maybe maintain it slightly and it keeps coming back. So I think any size. I mean, my brain walks past stuff and goes, could do one there, could do one there, could do one there. So, I think we'd always try to work with whatever we had.
And then the other question that I wanted to pick up, and you've mentioned a couple of things, like schools can have them and they can fruit during the school term, not during the summer, which as a veg gardener, I'm like, how would you make that happen? Because mine is most fruitful in the summer. But in terms of timing, so are they going to be optimal times to plant these? Are they going to be the sorts of things that people could order throughout the year? Because you're talking about a soft launch in February next year. To me, that's still the depths of winter. What are the timings like on these boxes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, not entirely sure of the answer to that, but the reason we chose Feb is it's quite possibly the earliest time we can get out, and we just want to get going with it. Obviously, if there's early frosts, that will delay the start time. So it's very much depending on, I think, predominantly on the trees, I believe, when the boxes can be sent out. So, and depending on climate factors. So February, and I think probably and throughout the year until, actually I'm not going to say that's something I can come back to you on. How about that?
I think that would be really useful actually as a follow-up point, because you know, there are those who would be interested in buying this tomorrow, but not sure whether that's the right time of year to do the planting. So if you could come back to us on that at some point, that would be really, really useful. We've also talked a little bit around who you think could benefit from this, and I wonder if maybe it would just be good to pull out a couple of key groups that you think, you know, following this session, they should be getting online and ordering their box, because it'll have a really great impact in their community. So who do you see as your potential market?
I think any community groups that have access to a green space or a meadow or a nature patch, or space that they want to do something in, or currently doing something in. It might be orchards they have already. They've got a load of fruit trees and they actually just want the ground cover. You can retrofit around that. I think, individuals, local authorities. So if these pocket parks are being asked for, then there's hopefully loads of. I think also it's a win for local councils. I hope in that they can reduce mowing and trimming maintenance costs, because you're handing it to nature and letting that actually deliberately go wild. So there's a huge, hopefully, saving on costs there.
Well, I think any local authorities listening in, and I certainly sent it off to my local authority this morning and said, I think you should, you know, listen into this and watch about it. But I think that's a really, really good thing, that it will save people money, bring communities together, and certainly seems like a really good thing to be able to be talking to local authorities about. I'm going to ask you the dirty question. I'm going to say, what are these going to cost, and what kind of ongoing costs do you see going alongside them?
Yeah, okay, so I will post afterwards what you actually get in the box. But so as I said, it's a fruit tree or a nut tree, currant and gooseberry bushes, shrubs like lavender, strawberry runners, vegetables that are perennial, and various herbs. So that whole kit costs £125. And then the retrofit, which is if you have a couple of your own fruit trees already, costs £95. But we're obviously looking at various grant sponsorship elements to cover the community costs if we can, because the dream would be the buy one gift one model if you can. And in terms of what you need, if you can borrow some tools off a neighbour or, you know, whoever you can find, then great. Otherwise it's tools, and that's largely your costs after that.
I think that sounds really, really achievable. So certainly within the boundaries of having sponsorship or getting small community grants, I like the fact that they've been costed at such an accessible price. And from a circular economy point of view, encouraging people to share garden tools and work together is certainly something that that is really, really positive. I mean, I think we've had a really, really great conversation today, Rosie, and I've absolutely loved hearing more about Forest Garden in a Box. I think it's an amazing scheme. You will definitely be getting an email from me. I have a tree that needs with a space underneath it that needs a bit of retrofitting, rewilding to blend into the rest of my vegetable garden. But I love the fact that they're accessible, they are community focused, they are bringing a natural system back into place that doesn't require kind of a huge amount of input from us human beings, and that will provide food in a regenerative way. So as far as I'm concerned, I think this is an amazing project. And I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming onto the DIF and talking to us.
Fab. Well, thanks very much for having us and listening. Am I allowed to do can I do a shout out for our email if anybody wants to?
Of course you can, absolutely. Tell us how we can get hold of you.
Here we go. Well, it's just hello@nationalforestgardening.org. I'll post it at the end. But, you know, for anyone who's not Manchester based but interested in a box, but equally might want to sort of volunteer a plot or give us some feedback as they get going, please do drop us a line. Other than that, thank you for having us.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Rosie, and thank you very much to those in the audience who joined us this morning on our DIF session. Please remember that there are many other DIF sessions happening over the next couple of days, so join in with us, and you can either join us online live or you can watch the sessions when they are posted as recordings afterwards. Please keep your comments coming in, and we look forward to hearing you on more DIF sessions.